Congratulations, you made it through your first week, almost. I'm Mr. Chris Jedi Batondo. I'm your scheduler. Yeah, it's my fault. Today I have the privilege and honor to introduce a dynamic speaker who I think you're going to love, Mr. Jason Womack. He's from the Leadership Institute here at Air University. He's an experienced instructor. He's responsible for a course that builds on leadership experiences and education for squadron commanders, providing tools for them to create effective, adaptive, and lethal squadrons. Jason is also an author, a leadership coach, a mentor, a TEDx speaker, a triathlete, a husband, a son, a brother, and a friend. Class 20 Bravo, please put your hands together for Mr. Jason Womack.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this thing. I know it's not your first time here in Polifka. 3 questions that I'm going to ask you to grab onto. Do not write on the 3x5 card yet. That's coming in a little while. But there's 3 questions I want you to think about. The first one you heard from the time you were little. Used to be a time when someone would walk into the room, they'd walk down into a whatever it was, they'd look down at us, because we were about that big, and they would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Who guys asked this question as a kid? Going to be a few of you. Okay? Now, those of you in the room who were lucky enough to have an answer right away, you were little and you knew. Anybody know anybody who knew when they were little? Like, I want to be, and whatever it was. There's others of you that are still trying to figure it out. I don't want to be when I'm going to be sitting here right now, Polifka, SOS. Then there's a few of us who are pretty lucky. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There's a few of us who know that 60 months from now, what I want to be when I grow up is going to be different than what I be right now. So we put strategic in front of storytelling because there's 2 questions that needed to come after that. Who are my parents in the room? Quick show of hands. My parents. So the parents in the room, you're going to be tempted to ask that question that we were asked. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want you to follow it with 2 more, not in any order, but they fall. Here they go. Number 2, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because if you've got an airman, if you've got a civilian, if you've got a friend, if you've got a spouse, and she or he will let you know what they want to be when they grow up and what they want to do when you grow up, now you can serve them even more. You let me know what you want to do over the next 60 months. Now I know what TED Talk to recommend you watch. Now I know what magazine to subscribe you to. Now I know what book to suggest you at least skim. If you let me know what you want to do when you grow up. I told you there were 3, so then there's the 3rd one, which is what do you want to have when you grow up? And that one gets really weird. What do I want to have when I grow up? I want to have a job. I want to have my health. I'd like to have some cash in the bank account. I'd like to have some friends. I'd like to have love. I'd like to have a community I feel a part of. Because if you put those 3 things together, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? Now the next time someone walks by you and you're tempted to do the real quick. I got to walk the halls of Pentagon last summer, and it is amazing how quickly people walk by each other at the Pentagon. And then they'll mutter this thing as you walk by. Who's ever muttered this thing as you walk by? Who's ever muttered, "How you doing?" to somebody as you walk by? Who's ever muttered that, right? How you doing? Now, Air Force, what's the answer to how you're doing? The answer is? Sometimes I wish I could hear 700 people's minds at the same time. I want you to ask that question 2 more times. How are you doing? Because that second time, you might actually get that person to pause for just a moment. How you doing? Fine. How are you doing? Well, how are you doing? And then if you're lucky enough for that person to share with you how they are being, what they are doing, and what they have, maybe then you can step in and help them out. And what a teachable moment story can be. What a teachable moment, you sharing a little bit of how you got to, why you got to, and what you got to where you are. With a story you can inspire. I literally will watch people's eyes pop while they're listening to a well-told story. Who are my TED.com viewers? Who's ever seen a TED.com program? Who does not know who TED is? You've never heard of TED. Who's TED? Go to TED.com and just go for the most watched videos, and those videos can influence the listener. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have ended a TED Talk ready to sign up for something, send my energy somewhere, or write someone a letter. Invite. And this goes two ways. Number one, I can invite you into the world and the vision that I see as future leaders, current leaders. You have a vision. You have a vision. This isn't a matter of whether you do or not. You have a vision. The moment your butt hits the seat in your car and you drive to base, the moment you walk into your office, gosh, you have a vision when you open your email in basket. Right? Who's ever seen someone's name in your in basket and felt stress? Just their name. Because you have a vision. Maybe the best part of it is I can actually teach something with a story. Now, every single one of us, we're here in this room because we heeded a call. You heeded a call. I heeded a call. Everybody that's going to work with you over the next weeks that you're here, they listened to something that said, go, do this. Kind of like this guy, Ernie, up in the top left. And in the early 1940s, after Pearl Harbor was attacked, he heeded the call, the same call that you and I did, to serve. And next thing he knew, he was on a boat, and then he was at Thorpe Abbott's Field in the UK, and then he was over Germany, had cut a hole in the bottom of the airplane, and they were taking photos over Germany. And these photos tell a story. And so we found them and we scanned them, because that's what you do when you find old photos in a cigar box in the basement of a house. You scan them. And then as we're putting these onto the internet, we put them on that website Flickr, if anyone remembers that one. We put these on Flickr, and my wife, Jody, she turns to me, she goes, hey, what do you think these photos are? I said, classified. I mean, look, I'm just a historian, but there's numbers on these things, and there's names on these things. Anyway, Saturday and Sunday, she kept scanning, she kept posting, she kept scanning. Monday morning, the phone rings. We're at our breakfast nook in Ojai, California. It's just south of Santa Barbara, south of Vandenberg. That's where we lived for 26 years, actually, same house for 19. And what happened was she took these photos, put them on Flickr. Monday morning, the phone rings. She answers it on speaker. I'm sipping my coffee. She's sipping her coffee. And this is what we hear. Hello? Yes, is this Mrs. Womack? Yes. Did you post those photos? I told you. And then the guy says, my name's Mike Faley. I'm the historian of the 100th Bomb Group, Heavy. We have a museum in Palm Springs, California. You have photos that we've never seen before, tales that we don't have photos of until those planes were shot down or went missing. We don't have these. Would you come down and donate them to the museum? Folks, when the Air Force asks you to do something like that, what's the answer? Yes! So Jody and her mom drive down to Palm Springs. While they're there, they hear wind that Grandpa Ernie's old squadron, Grandpa Ernie, who died when Jody was 5, who she never heard those stories. He never talked about the war to a 5-year-old. We found this box with photos in it, and we got invited to the 100th Bomb Group reunion in Cleveland, Ohio, because it rocks. And while we're there, I had to ask veterans of World War II the question I invite any one of you to ask a veteran of World War II. Now, you need to do this quick because we're losing them. TSA, when you fly, you know they say to go to the airport 2 hours early for security check. I get to the airport 2 hours early to go find a vet. Because as an historian and as a storyteller, I find one who's wearing a hat, wearing a jacket, or being pushed in a wheelchair, and I find one with a little bit of time because that's how much I need. I'll ask them the question that will unlock history in front of your eyes. How did you get home from the war? You want to be inspired? You want to be influenced? You want to be informed? Because you know what these men and women talk about? An America that you and I now serve. It's a different America. They tell you a story about being dropped off in Mobile and having to find their way to Strongsville, Ohio, getting dropped off in San Francisco and having to make their way to Boise, Idaho, or being dropped off in Baltimore, not having a family to return to and having to make it up. And they talk about America that welcomed them and thanked them. And while we're there at this event, I wind up meeting this guy named DeMarco. He's an OG over at Mildenhall, the 100th Air Refueling Wing, which is now the legacy group of the 100th Bomb Group. And he's talking about legacy and leadership and influence and inspiration. So I walk up to him. I make awkward eye contact. I share with him. I say, hey, I study leadership. I've written some books. And he says, would you fly over to Mildenhall and talk to my folks? When someone in the Air Force asks you something like that, what's the answer? So Jody and I went over to Mildenhall. We got to hang out with DeMarco. I got in a flight simulator. All I remember is terrain, terrain. That's what I remember from that experience. So next year, I get a call from Montgomery, Alabama. Bill is now the commandant at ACSC, and he says, would you come out to ACSC? Will you talk to my folks? For the 4 years that he was out here in that position, I got to fly out 2 to 4 times a year and share some ideas, until one day I got an email, and the email said, hey, we know you study leadership. We know you've got people in your network. We're building a new school. It's called the Leadership Institute. Chief of Staff said, we need to revitalize the squadron. We've got a report. And then he says, hey, JW, do you know anybody who might be interested in coming to Montgomery to build a leadership school? I said, I know a guy. I know a guy who found some photos, who went to a reunion, who took a risk and found a way to call. So for each one of you in this room, why you do what you do, there is more to your story. Today actually marks my 366th day here in Montgomery, Alabama. I signed a 3-year term agreement as an administratively determined employee, which means at the end of 3 years, they can re-sign me for another 3, or if they're done with me, they can move me out. My hope is to stay here for as long as they'll let me. There are 3 things that your airmen, your civilians, your family, and the communities that you move to every couple of years need to know about you. They need to know what it is you see up here that they just can't see yet. My mentor, Frances Hesselbein, anytime I get time with her, she will always ask me this question. Mr. Womack, she always calls me Mr. Womack, I don't know why. Anyway, Mr. Womack, she says, when you look out the window, what is totally visible to you that other people just haven't caught up to yet? See, here's the deal, folks. If I go out to the garden, I dig up a rock about the size of a cantaloupe. Can you all see that in your mind? I dig up a rock about the size of a cantaloupe, and I drop it on the table in front of us, and I say, hey, will you describe the rock to me? You're going to describe the rock to me. You're going to tell me what you see. It's a rock. It's got jagged edges. It's got dirt falling off on my kitchen table now. Why'd you put it there? I, on the other side, am going, no, man, this thing's like purple and incandescent, and there's like light glittering off of crystal. This is awesome. And you're like, dude, it's a rock on my table with now dirt on my kitchen. What are you looking at? At this point, we have one of 2 options, and every one of us has been there. He or she can yell louder telling me what they see. Anyone ever had a boss yell at you louder about what their vision is? Or we can switch places. Because if you're looking at the back of this rock and I'm looking at the cutout form of the geode, we are looking at 2 different whats. The next thing that your people need to know about you is how you got here. Your people are curious. Yesterday, I got to speak with your first sergeants over at the First Sergeants Academy. These are folks that are about to pin on their diamond. They're about to join that triad out there. And with that audience, I took a risk. Don't know if you want to play with this, but I'll ask it of this audience so you can see what they got. I said, how many of you know someone right now that is questioning the decisions they've made and whether or not they're going to continue with that decision? And quite a few of those first sergeants to be said, I know somebody. And whether that's a relationship they're questioning, whether that's a job choice they're questioning, whether that's a life choice that they're stepping toward or away from. But people need to know how you made the choices because they're curious. The third thing that people need to know is, why do you do what you do? Why do you show up every day? Why do you want to stand in front of someone and be the leader that she or he can come to when times are good and celebrate, or when times are tough and they need some help? Those of you who have a 3x5 note card, ideally that's the majority of you, I need you to fold that in half so you're looking at the two blank sides. By the way, if you do not have a 3x5 note card, look to your left or right, make awkward eye contact with somebody, and ask for help. Hamburger or hot dog? Let's do hamburger fold today. You got me. Now, on one blank side of that, I'm going to ask you to write down, and by the way, if you need a pen, you're going to have to borrow one of those from a buddy too. If you get asked for a pen, sell it. I'm American. What I want you to do is I want you to write down in code or in shorthand or in acronyms or in a couple of words, I want you to write down a couple of your signature story topics. What you dream of. I would write down, I have always dreamed of serving large audiences, dropping ideas that they might use later. Now, I've got a bunch of stories about that. One is, my wife found some photos, we put them on Flickr, she got a phone call, I went to Mildenhall, and I got hired at Air University. That's the short version. How you see the world. Well, one of the stories that I have is, leader does not need a title. And I've got a bunch of stories about how I've seen non-titled leaders transform organizations. I'll give you one cue to know if you're a leader. You invite people to a meeting and they show up, you're a leader. You invite people to a meeting and they don't show up, work on your leadership. I was out at Travis last month. I got to share some time with the 571st out there. And one of the things that I encouraged one of my mentees to do, I said, hey, raise the flag. This topic that you're interested in, raise the flag. Let people know that they might be able to learn something from you. I just got a text this morning. He had 40 people show up to the flag that he raised. Or maybe why you do what you do. Maybe 2001 is something that significantly impacted you like it impacted some of us. Maybe a mentor in junior high or high school significantly impacted you like it impacted us. Maybe you saw a sign on the wall and it was the right time, the right day, and the right place to make you rethink the direction you were going in and turn around. Does everyone have, actually raise your hand if you have at least 3 stories, please. Okay, I don't see a lot of hands, so go. These are just the topics. You look out the window. What is the world, the America, the service that you dream of? How do you see things differently? By the way, the easy way to get your second story of that list is if people complain about things that you don't think are bad, there's a cool story in there. If people complain about things you are actively fixing, there's a cool little story in there. All right. I'm going to ask you to look up and down that list of stories. If you've got 1, it'll be easy. If you've got 7, 7's okay, by the way. Overachievement is cool. I'm going to ask you to pick one of those stories. I want you to pick the one story that if you left SOS, you got back to the unit that you're going to go back to, and if someone who was having a tough day came up to you and shared with you a tough day that they were having, this is a story that you might be able to pull out of your pocket to inspire them or to influence them, to invite them into the vision you see, or maybe to inform them. Now, if you're on the fence of what story that you would want to work on while you're here at SOS, and I'll help anybody who wants, let me ask you to look down that. Who's stuck on which story to pick? There's going to be a couple of you. Who's stuck? Okay, look at the list. Look at the list. Look at your list. That one. Got it? See, because whatever I do next, you can do this with the other ones around there. Let's go to the other blank side of your 3x5 note card. Up on top of that card, write the title of that story, a word of that story, an acronym of that story. I might call this the photo story. And then I want you to write down 3 details about that story. Maybe someone's name, maybe a place you were at, maybe information you received, maybe a thought you had, maybe a way that you changed how you looked because of that single event. Do we have to write 3 details? No, 4 is fine. When you have 3 details, I'm going to ask you to silently but carefully go ahead and stand up, please. I say carefully because OSHA's always watching. When you have 3 details, please stand up. Now someone's thinking, really, he's serious. I have to write down 3 details. Mm-hmm. I will ask, for the sake of the folks who are still thinking and writing, if those of you standing could keep the noise down, that'd be fantastic. I've got a few more people writing some details. Does spelling count? Nope. If you happen to look at your partner's card and write their details, that's not cheating, it's collaborating. Don't tell your SOS instructors I said that. Okay, as long as you have 2 details, let me ask you to stand up. Sweet. All right, here's the deal. Story is going to have, I'll say 3 to 5 things. Whenever I watch a TED Talk, whenever I watch a lecture, whenever I eavesdrop at a coffee shop. Anybody else ever eavesdrop in a coffee shop, listen to someone else? Just me, cool. I'm always listening for these 5 elements. So what I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to go for 90 seconds at a time. You're going to be in groups of 2, A and B. Hold on a second, I'll explain the whole thing. Groups of 2, you're going to turn to your neighbor. You've got 90 seconds to make it through the 5 elements of a shareable story. Around the Air Force, usually I hear something like, so there I was. That's what I hear. All right? The context, where I was, who I was with, what was going on. Very quickly, what was the challenge? What was the opportunity in front of you? What was the decision that you had to make? What was the conflict? What was getting in the way of that happening? What was getting in the way of you moving forward? How did you resolve it? And perhaps if you get to it in the 90 seconds, was there a lesson learned? So, the first thing you need to do is to turn, make awkward eye contact with somebody. When you're in a group of 2, just shoot your hands up in the air. Let's see if we can do this silently. If you can hear my voice, please snap 1 time. If you can hear my voice, please snap 2 times. If you are not in a group of 2, raise your hand. Everybody else, lower your hands. Okay? Look for a hand. Go find one. Go. A and B. Who's A? Raise your hand. Who's B? B, start telling your story. 90 seconds. Go. Alrighty, friends, if you can hear my voice, please snap 1 time. If you can hear my voice, please snap 2 times. If you can hear my voice, please snap 3 times. Person A, you're now going to tell your 90-second version of the context, the challenge, the conflict resolution. 90 seconds, rock and roll. Calm down. Alrighty, friends, let's do it one more time. If you can hear me, will you please snap 1 time? If you can hear me, will you please snap 2 times? If you can hear my voice, please snap 3 times. High five, fist bump. Go ahead and grab a seat. The next part of the workshop process would be, I would ask you to please point at the person who you think already has a story that you would like the whole group to see. You're not going to do this because we don't have time to do the workshop, but I would be curious, how many of you would point at your partner that she or he has a story that needs to be told? Bam. You've got how many more weeks of SOS? While you're here, work that story. If I can be of service, I'm just over in building 803. I'm in the global. I get to say that now. It's pretty cool. Okay. On the back of the note card, you should have 10 blue lines. Every note card, every 3x5. 10 blue lines, 1 red line. Totally different. The red line, go ahead and write the beginning title of your story. That story that you just told. All right? I wrote, Moving to Maxwell. Because I will tell you, when I did fly out for the job talk to join Air University, and I did the job talk and the interview, and they called me that night. They said, wow, you did great. You were totally different than everybody else. You've written books, and you've started companies, and you've done things, and you know, the job is in Maxwell, and you live in Santa Barbara. I said, I know. And then I got the call, and they said, yeah, we're not going to hire you. Okay. And then a month later, buddy emails, says, hey, there's another job opening. I said, cool. So I submitted that job app. I flew back out. I did another job talk. I did another interview. I went to an awkward dinner. And they said, you did great, man. You answered lots of questions. That was fantastic. I'm not going to hire you. All right. Then the third time, hey, there's this job opening. Do you want to come out? Nah. I said, you've heard my story. They're like, well, just hit the application, put it in. I said, you've already had me come out. You've heard my stories. You know what I can do. Actually, I think that's what got me the job. Then I had to sell it to my wife. See, context is where every story begins. Context tells us where and when it began. A story needs a time and a place. I was a 7th grade avid teacher in Santa Barbara, gang. From the time I can remember, I played school. My brother and sister would come home from school and we'd play school. They'd finish their homework for school and I'd give them more. From the time I can remember, I have wanted to be here. So of course, when the OG at Mildenhall says, will you come out? Yes! That was my first time ever visiting an Air Force base. And then for the next 4 years, anytime they called, yes, I got to go to Travis, I got to go to Nellis, I got to go to Vandenberg, I got to go to Scott. And there's this challenge. By the way, on the note card, go ahead and on the top blue line, write down the word context. And you'll have 2 lines to fill that in. So go to the 3rd line, and that's where you're going to write down the word challenge. Now, the challenge, that lets the listener know what the problem was, what the opportunity was, what the gift was, what happened that changed the way I looked at things. Anyone ever been mid-argument realizing that you're actually wrong? Like in the middle of it, you're like, dude, I'm actually wrong. I can't admit I'm wrong. That's a challenge. When I was at Santa Barbara City College, back when I was in City College days, and I was walking down a hallway, and my professor, Dr. Solberg, his desk faced the window, and the window faced the Pacific Ocean. The door was this, that's where I would put my desk too, I guess, right? Fair enough. There's no good reason why that particular day Dr. Solberg was looking out the door, not the window. There's no particular good reason that I walked by at the moment his eyes were open, and I still to this day do not understand why he asked me how I was doing. And then he said, "How are you doing?" And then he said, "How are you doing?" And on that April day of 1991, my life changed. Because I said something out loud that I hadn't let myself hear about the direction I was going in my life that he allowed me to say out loud. The challenge offers you the opportunity to step fully into the goal or the objective. The next TED Talk you watch, realize when they gave you what their challenge was. They'll drop it. My challenge is this was my backyard. My challenge was Jody, my wife and best friend of 27 years, only lived 90 miles from her best friend of 47 years. See, Jody had never lived more than 90 miles away from her mama. And I come in second every time to Aunt Eileen. So when I turned to her and I said, Air University has offered me the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Maxwell as a civilian, administratively determined civilian instructor. And she goes, well, how many times a year do you go? I said, 80 hours a pay period. Now you go to the next 2 lines, and I invite you to write down the word conflict. Choice point. Fork in the road. Should I stay or should I go now? Because if I stay, there could be trouble. And if I go, that sucker could double. What was the struggle between here and there? And that story that you only had 90 seconds to share with your partner. It's kind of like Albert Einstein said, if I had a problem and I had an hour to solve it, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem, 5 minutes solving it. If I were telling a story, I'd probably spend 90% of my time trying to understand what the underlying conflict is. On the one hand, I had this conflict of loving working with this community. This is one of my volunteer trips up to Travis. I was in love with what I was doing and the opportunity to come and serve you.
When things went weird with my mom, it's like, I have to be there and I have to be fully present. For a while, I was bringing her up to our home in Ojai from Los Angeles, and I would take care of her a couple days, give my dad a week off or so. And I don't have kids, but I would try and figure out how to fill somebody's day. And so, you know, those adult coloring books where you get, my mom's really artistic, and so I got her some of those, and I got her some postcards to mail and write. And she wrote a postcard to her mom, my grandma, who had happened to have died 3 years before that, but she didn't remember. And she goes, "Oh, dear Mom, I'm here visiting Jody, but she's so busy. I hope she has some time for me later." And it's like, oh, the dagger in the heart, and just twisting. And I read this postcard later, and I kept it as a reminder. It's like being physically in the room with somebody is not being present. Being on your phone, being on typing, that is not good enough, and people know it. So I'm really glad I got that hard lesson, because it changed me. And I just told Jason and my clients, like, when I'm with her, I'm like on vacation. I'm not available. I don't do calls. I don't check email. I am 100% with her, because these are the moments. She remembers who I am right now. Now that I know how precious that is, and I don't know how long that lasts, I gotta soak up every drop of that. And then when I work hard, and I work efficiently, and I work productively, and I put my head down, and I power through. So it's really helped prioritize playtime, love time, work time, all that.
Conflict. Because about the time that I got the call to join you here at Maxwell, Jody's family got the diagnosis that Eileen has dementia. So Jody's best friend of 47 years, never having lived more than 90 miles from her, I show up and I say, "Hey, would you like to go from Santa Barbara, California to Montgomery, Alabama?" Seamless transition. We had to come to some resolution. We had to find a way to make this work. Some of you are going to get called to do things that bring you conflict. But having that foundation of what you see when you look at the world, why you do what you do, and how you want to show up for those people you lead, that's what's going to help you sail through and find a new resolution and a new resolution and a new resolution. If you tell a story well, people are going to get to a point they're going to say, "What happened? How did that turn out? What were the second, third, fourth order effects you didn't anticipate?" Last year, we tracked it. We moved to Montgomery on January 16, 2019. We tracked Jody has spent, in 2019, 43 nights with her parents in Pasadena, Los Angeles this year. Now, that's 43 nights that I've been geo-separated. But I can tell you this, I don't think Jody spent 43 nights at home in the decade before that. Unanticipated consequence of finding some photos, putting them on Flickr, going to a museum, flying to Cleveland, going to Mildenhall, and just saying yes to your Air Force. It gave me experience with these results. So when the training squadron of Vandenberg says, "Will you come out and talk to our trainees?" the answer is, and now I'm in DTS. The last two lines of your note card. Can I ask you to go to the last two lines? And let me ask you to write down the word lesson. You tell a story that doesn't have a lesson, a good time was had by all, and that's all. I can entertain you. But if I don't end that story with a lesson, a moral, a so what or a so that, I may miss an opportunity. You see, sometime in your career, maybe next week, maybe next month, who's going to FaceTime with someone tonight on the phone? Maybe tonight, that person that you love, that you look up to, that mentors, coaches, or develops you, maybe they start telling you a story. And at the end of that, you're going to say, so what's the message there? Yeah, he had a tough day. What'd you learn there? What I learned is this community, it's a family. When we do our Valor workout during the leader development course for Squadron Command, we get all 60 to 70 future squadron commanders in PT gear, their morale t-shirts, and we throw them into the gym and we work through a Valor workout in memory of a fallen airman. That family comes together, and this family is so tight. You are so close that many times we run this class, there is someone in our audience who has a connection to that airman. And when I went to AFA back in September, I heard the chief and the chief. I heard them say, do not let someone fall twice. We have to hold on to this family, this memory, this opportunity. I'm going to ask you to take 120 seconds in groups of one. It's by yourself. And I want you to fill up as many of those 10 lines as you can. I want 2 lines of context. Where were you? Who was around? I want 2 lines of challenge. What was the opportunity thrust upon you? Or what did you raise your hand and ask for? I want you to write down what your conflict was. A word or 2 to indicate what you did to resolve. And my guess is some of you already know the lesson you learned. Let's get that in rough draft writing. What do you want to be when you grow up was 33% of what we need our leaders to get from us. The next 2 questions are answered with what you've begun to rough draft. The next time you have an opportunity to influence someone, the next time you have an opportunity to inspire someone, the next time you have an opportunity to invite someone into the world you see or the community you're a part of, see what you can do to bring this story to life. While you're here at Maxwell, you've got an opportunity to practice these stories. I would pull 5, 7, 10 of you, your flight together. Maybe it's easier to speak this story in front of someone that's not in your flight. But if you can leave here with a story or 2 that you can tell in 2 to 5 minutes, you're running the opportunity to help the tribe that you've joined. Somehow or another, gang, we all joined a heed to call in our own unique and weird way. I will not say that 60 months ago I would have told you that moving from Santa Barbara to Maxwell was in my future. And that wisens me up to realize that 60 months from now, I have no idea where I'm going to be. My hope is that I'm able to serve a little bit in the capacity that you've invited me into your worlds for. I thank you, and I hope I see you around the circle. Thank you.